Chapter 14, Vast Active Living Intelligence System. Vast Active Living Intelligence System. All 33 of them failed, which apparently happened never, and even the lady herself sustained damage, so everyone had something to say. Blame this way and that, at least I managed to do this, while you accomplished nothing. If everyone had done what I did, then it would have succeeded. Sage Reese had no standing to speak in this debate, the circuitousness of which reminded her of forum arguments she moderated in the past, and besides she took a lot of damage and had to regenerate. That's what the others told her at least, because in this darkness, in this black space, she had no form to heal. The others told her not much, and seemed to expect her to learn via osmosis, which was literally what happened when her formless blob of self ebbed into someone else's formless blob of self and their memories commingled. Such as now, when the vaguely contiguous element known as Sage Reese passed through the likewise element known as Catalina Trujillo. When Catalina Trujillo had a physical form, she wore azure furs and wielded tomahawks. She ruled Ciudad Juarez from 1999 to 2003 and, with innumerable accomplices, partook in maybe like 50 murders, any one of which Sage could recall as if she herself committed it. Not that murders were the only component of Trujillo's conscious. Friendships, triumphs, fears, intimacies likewise clustered, and in that first moment of contact between souls Sage struggled to piece her own thoughts from the others. None of you were even worth a shit, said Trujillo. It felt like it was just me out there. I had the target, I dragged her out the damn building, and you fuckleheads, where were you? Sucking your fucking dicks off. Honestly, Sage had only one set of memories she wanted to protect and keep private, but of course trying to keep those memories secret only made her think more about them, which must have made them easier for Trujillo to access, because while she berated her cohort she gave Sage a telepathic nudge and flashed a few pornographic memories of her own to match the ones Sage had of Aurora. Then Trujillo ebbed past and their memories unmixed. The sensation disoriented her, but she worried mostly that the boundary between herself and everyone else would erode, that Sage Reese would spill somewhere and be lost forever. She experienced it in some of the forms with which she came in contact, the memories of 20 or 30 people jumbled in one mind, details of lives from all across North America arranged in an incomprehensible narrative, and no real concept of the original possessor's identity. But stronger personalities, like Trujillo, had maintained themselves mostly intact. So Sage had to protect her boundaries. It required not physical fortitude. In this zero-dimensional space, she had no hope against merging with others, but mental. She had to erect fortifications of a definitive Sage Reese, and that required a clear mind, clear thoughts, clear purpose. Given the circumstances, she figured she had handled herself quite fucking well, thank you very much. All this boasting, said a girl across the room. In the 2 days since Sage became part of this amalgam, rough estimate, because time was weird in non-space too, she had already merged with everyone at least once. But at some point it became too many memories and new ones crowded older ones. This girl, whose name and life Sage lacked conception of, continued, what matters most is Our Lady. And in the end, when she was attacked, none of us remained to protect her. Murmurs of agreement. Even now, she remains vulnerable to attack. I'm regenerated already, if she needs me I can protect her. That only means you didn't take much damage in the last fight. What did you bitch out or what? I got my neck slashed, not a big wound, but you can't expect me to keep running around with no neck. Fucking pussies. Sage here's newer than you all and she didn't back down until she had her whole damn body fucked up. A new personality entered hers the same time her name was mentioned. Abigail Ann Renfrew of Vermont, who never killed anyone but tried. She mingled less brusquely than Trujillo, breaching the membrane of Sage's headspace with a timorous shuffle as though asking permission neither granted nor needed, and even afterward only layering herself on top of Sage in a way that kept themselves distinct via a metaphysical organization only basely comprehensible. Nonetheless, the same memories surfaced. God. Fuck. By now they must all know her as the nymphomaniac who could only imagine sex. Shit. No, it's okay, we all have those memories. That was the thought of Abigail Ann Renfrew, although it was also the thought of Sage Reese. I mean, I never actually did anything with anyone. But I thought about it, and I mean, I can tell this is someone you truly loved. That's amazing. You're so lucky to have had something like that. That didn't make Sage feel any better about the situation. Oh, sorry, I know it's private, Sage Abigail thought, at the same time surprised that Abigail Sage had read her thoughts. I'll just stop thinking about them. Here's a memory I like to share. It was an Easter basket. Inside the basket was a Labrador puppy with a pink ribbon. On the living room couch behind it, Sage and Aurora tangled together and ruined the whole thing. God, this was awful. No, it's okay. It's awful. We all think these weird things when we're worried somebody can see what we're thinking. Ah. You'll get better at it. Abigail detached. Sage for a moment was only herself. But it would not be long before the next mind melded, or two minds at once, or three, or sometimes even four. Some minds delved deeper into hers than others. Keep it straight. Keep Sage Reese separate. Maybe thinking about her moments with Aurora all the time was a good thing. Maybe it helped her better define herself. She braced for the next merger, but before that a voice said, Sage Reese. You're needed outside. It was the girl who served as the ladies' spokeswoman. The ladies' mind was the only one none of them had access to, even though Sage suspected whatever non-space they inhabited was, in physical terms, the interior of the ladies' soul gem. I'm far from regenerated, said Sage. That's fine. You're only needed to speak to some people you know. Some people she knew? San Bernardino? Or Lila? Some girl or girls from Seattle, said Catalina Trujillo. They showed up after you peaced out. This information dully thudded against her non-existence. The Seattle twins. One a knight or king and the other a jester or fool. Of course. I'll talk to them. She was sent out immediately. Her physical manifestation had not recovered from the many nails one of the Chicago girls shot into her, and which rusted her armor and bone. Her corporeal form slumped as soon as the lady's power drew the soul of Sage Reese out of the darkness, but two other manifestations, those who sustained less damage, grabbed her before she fell. The lady hovered in the night sky a mile distant. Sage stood on the roof of either the housing development building they fought in or one nearby. Before her, seated cross-legged, was the older twin in all her armor. Further back, on the edge of the roof, the younger twin reclined on her back with her rifle perched on her knee. She arched her spine, stretched, and uttered a yawn lost in the wind. 7 stories up was blustery enough and Sage's hair rushed across her face. Her 2 weak arms failed to brush them clear. So, said the older twin. There's our Denver.
What a fate!
That's our girl. The night made it hard to tell, but smoke rose from the identical housing development building adjacent theirs. A few police cars blinked around the scene of the caved-in entryway.
Why? You,
when Sage tried to speak more, a sharp pain coursed through her sugar candy ribs, and she buckled despite the support of her companions. They eased her into a more comfortable position and she tried again with telepathy. You two came here? To Chicago?
Yes.
We wanted your papers.
One of your goons made off with them. Came here.
Planned to let them go, but Mr. Kyubei gave some suggestions. So you'll, said Sage, so you'll come here, to Chicago, where their whole damn empire is, and all their soldiers, the entire army, but you refused, to help me in St. Louis against 3 of them? That's what you did?
Sage,
said one of the two supporting her.
It's not their whole army,
said the older twin. Saving St. Louis didn't appeal to us.
Most of them left for whatever reason.
But after you died, we had an incentive to look at your papers.
There are only about 20 here now, according to Kyubei.
One thing led to another and... Shut up. Shut up, shut up. Gah. You two are insufferable, absolutely insufferable, do understand? How can the two of you talk like that? You're not even in sync, you're fumbling over each other, you're cutting each other off, the first part of one is covering up the last part of the other, you're saying 2 totally different things at the same time. And it hurt. Her head throbbed and her lungs tightened. The pain from her wounds intensified, and even though her rant lacked any physical component, it exhausted her. She panted for breath. She had to flap a limp hand upright to indicate she still intended to speak until she had regained enough energy to continue. You two are a cacophony. One of you needs to say your whole thing at a time if you want me to understand.
Maybe we don't want you to understand,
said the elder. But the younger said nothing. So the elder continued,
Kyubei told us to meet you.
Pause.
He said the 2 of us, if we teamed up with you.
Pause.
He said we would have a strong chance at succeeding in our respective goals.
Part of Sage's upper body, under her collarbone, caved inward. She sagged like jelly, and the girl to her left that supported her propped her entire back under Sage's arm to keep her a semblance of afloat. That Chicago girl's rust magic. NNG. Fever skittered down her body. And the sudden spasm of despair, that for the rest of her life these endless voices would become inescapable, that no quiet would ever exist again, an aurora.
Remember what the lady needs of you,
said the right supporter. Sage's right arm had melted and its pink goo oozed down her supporter's side. The line between them blurred. Yeah. Yes. Sage lifted her head. Seattle. Our Lady has, at least 30 magical girls at her disposal. We don't need you to. You would be better. GFFFH. That dark room back in Denver with the cold and the sheets and the body of Aurora. Be better if you go back home. Someone has to take care of your city.
The other girls in our area can handle it for a few days.
Pause.
We want to work with your Terminatrix lady.
Didn't you always say? The younger sister wiped the barrel of her rifle with a rag. That taking down Chicago was the top priority of all responsible magical girls? Sure, we didn't want to help you in St. Louis. The explanation for that's simple.
We can defeat this empire together.
If we were going to defeat the empire, we wanted to do it on our terms. Not yours, Miss Denver. Get her out. Get her out of this body and this head. Get her away from these people. Everything inside and out of her melted. 5, 6, 7 voices compounded inside her, a resounding chorus of voices from the side of the lady, that desired a partnership, that crowded out Sage's own useless despair at the words of the younger twin. She had to maintain herself. Sage Reese. She took a deep breath with the concavity of her ribcage. One eye had melted shut. She could force the other voices out if she settled into her depths and remembered, a roar. That was the only voice she needed inside her mind, that whisper. She remembered it, conjured that moment in the darkness, the two of them together, and wielded it as an amulet to ward away anyone who dared encroach upon her sacred space. The voices quieted. The twins quieted, apparently in anticipation of a response. Sage Reese solidified. Her legs shifted and she pushed herself upright, albeit with her supporters as crutches. She breathed and said, "If you'll allow me a moment, my lady. I know the character of these twins better than you. And since you sent me to speak with them instead of any random intermediary, that must mean you value my experience with them at least to some degree. So may I?" After a moment of silence, a voice came from one of the souls inside the lady. "The lady grants you permission to express your opinion." It was a distinct voice. It wasn't Sage's voice inside her own head. She sighed. She breathed. She remembered Aurora. "These Seattle twins are unreliable and untrustworthy. We have plenty of magical girls of our own. In fact, according to our intelligence, we outnumber the Chicago girls still in the city. It would be better to rely on those we know we can trust then."
"Clown Muffle kicked all your asses,"
said the elder twin. "Be fair. I kicked some of their asses too," said the younger. "With my bullet."
"True.
There's really only one magical girl there.
Denver's not even real."
"An interface.
To lower our guard."
Still acts Denver-like."
"Clever mimicry."
"We've been had." Their conversation blitzed with no pause for interjection. Whatever odd desync happened earlier had been resolved. The twins returned to perfect simultaneity. If anyone was an interface, a program, a machine, it would be them, and their stupid twinness, as though real twins ever acted this way, that was totally made up and stupid. Denver, Sage Reese, she still retained her memories and her identity, she still operated under her own control, most of the time, and these jeering, cocky bastards could. The younger twin straightened and raised her rifle. She stared down the sights at something off the rooftop. at the housing development building they had fought in, where the police had gathered. Everyone else looked too, even the elder twin who had her back to the younger. It didn't require a sniper rifle scope to see what had happened. On the road a white car had parked and two young women in white suits stepped out to examine the wreckage. A moment later the telepathic relay of one muttered, "Lieutenant Bolingbroke? Lieutenant Bolingbroke, do you copy? It's Dalton and I. We've arrived, are you still in the area?"
"Clear shot,"
said the younger twin. The wind obscured her voice.
"Don't shoot." "If you say so."
The rifle lowered. At least they had a modicum of prudence. Obviously, it would be idiotic to start a fight in an open area swarming with police, and more reinforcements were likely en route. Sage was about to comment but stopped. Telepathy, with enemies in earshot, would give away their position. But her mouth failed to open when she bit it. She was essentially silenced. Damn! Damn it, damn it! These twins! God! But she reveled in this anger inside her, enjoyed the feel of its spread through her chest, because she knew not a single other soul in the lady's bosom would feel the personal fury she now felt, and that became another block in the tower of selfhood. Nonetheless, the lady landed on the rooftop beside her, and all that emotion drained in the aura of chilliness that pervaded from her black form. The two girls who supported Sage relinquished her to turn and give proper obeisance to the one who had redeemed them all, and Sage herself managed to land on a knee and bow her head, or else that was the natural arc of her structurally unstable body. The wings of the black form peeled away. No face appeared, but the face could see. "We have."
"I have."
Her voice, deep and raspy, more wheeze than words. "Considered."
"Considered."
"What now to do?"
"What now to do?"
It felt like an echo. Every word spoken manifested in her skull instants before the first syllable sounded.
"Oh.
Elder."
"Big lady herself."
"Younger." "We will."
"I will."
"Accept your."
"Accept your."
"Offer of."
"Offer of."
"Alliance."
"Alliance." "Smart." "And they say you specialists are all crazy." "You can be smart and crazy." "True."
And that was it? So Sage's voice never mattered? Had her arguments even been considered? What had? Shut the fuck up already. The fact you even got a second to speak is, no, get out. It's true though, Sage, you should consider yourself fortunate. No, the lady was more than kind to you. But we.
But I.
Cannot.
Cannot.
Continue to fight.
Continue to fight.
Until our souls are regenerated.
Until my souls are regenerated. How long's that gonna take? They'll call reinforcements before too long. We might be in trouble then. Better be fast.
It will.
It will.
Only take.
Only take.
Tonight.
Tonight.
The twins looked at one another. The glance seemed one-sided, because the elder twin's helmet covered her face completely, so any meaning gleaned from expression alone would come only from the younger. Were those Sage's thoughts or the lady's or someone else's? Well, that thought had to be hers. Shut up, we said. A nod from one twin to another segued into a break in the silence.
All right. We attack tomorrow morning. POW.
She pounded her fist into her palm.
Wipe the Chicago girls off the map. Then you take what you want, we take what we want.
An image of Murietta Temecula in her head.
And we go our separate ways. Deal.
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 And so after all this time, Denver was working with Seattle after all, these girls who essentially ran a cult of personality on her website. And thankfully, this time nobody pierced her mind to tell her to shut up about it. The lady must no longer intend to talk. It must require all of her concentration to speak even a little bit. At the resolution of the deal, the younger Seattle put down her rifle and reached over the lip of the rooftop. Her hand scuffled something loud enough to hear over the wind, and with an oof she hoisted a limp form onto the rooftop proper. It was a girl in a white suit like the ones they had seen below. Sage recognized her. The girl who fired the nail gun, and whom Sage cut with her star rod. Given process of elimination, it must be the Lieutenant Bolingbroke her fellows below were looking for. Unconscious, gashed, and bloodied.
Thought you might like this, said the younger Seattle. A token of our new partnership, if you will. We tried to interrogate her for information. She refused to crack, though. And we kinda knocked her out. We're not good at torture.
The younger twin stood and lifted Lieutenant Bolingbroke under the arm. With a single underhanded fling, she lobbed the body across the rooftop, until it landed on its head and skidded closer to the lady's feet. The lady, although she had no face, looked down at the offering. As the sisters watched, the wings of the lady parted, extended around Lieutenant Bolingbroke, and snatched her up completely. Before the lady finished consuming her, though, Sage's physical form dissolved and she returned to the void of her interior. No longer needed, she supposed, until her body regenerated and she might fight again. The soul and thoughts of one Nadia Grosbeck, of Charleston, South Carolina, merged with hers. Oh, thought Nadia Sage, you had such a pretty lover. Jealous. A pen burst in the mouth of 4th, 3rd, Centurion Joliet. She had chewed it absent-mindedly as she stared down the school assignment on her lamp-lit desk, and she must have chewed too hard because the ink spurted out the tube, into her mouth, and down her chin. She stood and held her hands like a tyrannosaur as she comprehended her predicament. Her throat made a guttural noise as thick splotches dropped onto her cardigan sweater and she fought not to swallow. She stood suspended in utter disbelief of her situation, uncertain how things had managed to exist for so many peaceful minutes only to upend now. Her mind blanked. Drop, drop, went the ink. Bathroom, finally the thought came to her and she rushed across her dormitory. In the bathroom she tilted her open mouth over the sink's basin. Her fingers, stained black, curled around the edge and the mangled pen rolled to the drain. She fumbled for the faucet handle and shoved her lips under the stream as soon as it flowed, only to draw back hissing at how hot the water was. Wait, her assignment. She staggered back to her desk and sure enough the ink covered half the paper and she clutched her hair as a wheeze of despair forced out her nose. At which point she pulled her hands away and realized she now had ink in her hair. When she wheeled back to the sink the water had only gotten hotter, so a thick trail of steam rose from it. All the while the taste sloshed around her jaw. After she fiddled with the second handle and the water hopefully cooled, she held her mouth to it again. But the moment before her lips touched the stream a vicious pounding rattled her door and spooked her so much she reared back and slammed her face into the faucet nozzle. The taste of blood mixed with the ink. The fist outside pounded again against her door. She resolved to ignore it. But someone transmitted to her telepathically, Centurion Joliet. Centurion Joliet. Milady, it's an emergency. She spat a black glob against the porcelain. I am busy. Extremely busy. Talk. Speak to Lieutenant Bolingbroke about it. Which word sounded more authoritative? Talk or speak? She had floundered in the middle over it, and felt stupider for splitting the difference. Nonetheless, she finally put her mouth under the water and let it wash over her tongue, around her teeth, and down her cheeks. Centurion Joliet. It is highly probable that Lieutenant Bolingbroke is deceased. Joliet's head went limp in the basin of the sink. The water ran down her face. She remained like that, eyes fixed against the sloped side of the porcelain, for many moments. Until the voice continued, Please, milady. We need your command. We are being invaded. 4th, 3rd Centurion Joliet entertained the possibility of escaping out the back window into the alleyway and due west. Unfortunately, it didn't matter which direction she fled, because the city sprawled on all sides. The only real direction she had was straight into the lake. And then down, down, down to the bottom. Milady. You are the only officer of military rank still within the city. Without you, we are lost. Yes. She reached up and turned the handles. The faucet water ceased and she seized both sides of the sink to pull herself out of it. She wiped her hands and her face on the towel, and the towel now had ink all over it too. One could find tranquility in his or her assured destruction, yes? At one point, death became so certain one could ease their heart in face of it. The points that truly ruined her were those where a glimmer of hope remained. Oh, what the fuck was she thinking? Everything rammed into her all at once and her body shook so violently she knocked the towel rack off the wall when she tried to put the towel back on it. She twisted for the back window only to see a gold-plated Chicago sister already there, looking in at her with a fist raised to rattle the glass. Joliet staggered across the room, got twisted in her desk chair, and flopped onto her face. She scurried upright and in seconds undid all the locks on her door, the chain, the deadbolt, the dial and the knob. And when she wrenched the door open and prepared to sprint, she had to stop on her first step because two more soldiers stood before her.
HNNK, RRK, Centurion Joliet.
The two soldiers saluted in unison. A few moments later, the soldier who had been at the back window rejoined them and saluted too. Joliet recognized two of them, Orland and Harvey. The third was one of the new girls assigned in the past couple days. Either Flossmoor or Paulus. She had, of course, memorized all the names of her new recruits and read each of their files diligently, like a good commander. Even if Bolingbroke handled all the regular affairs, it paralyzed Joliet to imagine the awkward situation when she got one of her subordinates' names wrong. Said Joliet.
What's the situation?
Orland, the senior-most of the trio, explained with blunt succinctness that caused Joliet to flinch at multiple points. Lieutenant Bolingbroke embarked on a standard wraith hunt with Paulus, Flossmoor, and Midlothian, the three newest recruits. It was typical for commanders to work with rookies to better assess their capabilities and provide the weaker ones with needed support. During the hunt, 3 invader Puella Magi attacked. The first was a Terminatrix who intended to kill Paulus. The other 2.
The Seattle Sisters,
said Joliet.
Correct, milady.
The new girl, Paulus, as the story confirmed, saluted.
They are twin sisters who hail from Seattle. They're known to be powerful and popular Puella Magi.
And nobody currently knew why they attacked or how they even entered the city.
I was forced to flee.
Palos had an automaton voice, and Joliet figured she still had difficulty adopting the lingo of the Empire.
My magic allows me to track the signatures of other Puella Magi. Lieutenant Bolingbroke's signature had remained motionless in the place where we were attacked for a long time. Until about 10 minutes ago it disappeared completely.
Not that Joliet had nursed hopes to the contrary, but based on the junior administrator's report, she knew how Palos's power worked. What nettled her deeper was that the junior administrator's report had also detailed that a Terminatrix was chasing Palos. Joliet had read it in the report, paused mid-sip of her coffee to reread it and ensure she understood it properly, and even thought to herself,
should we really be taking a girl who has a Terminatrix chasing her?
But did she do anything about it? Of course not. She had assumed Cook, who recruited Palos, knew what she was doing. Could one person be any less lucky? At least the dead had nothing left to worry over. Her arms twisted around herself.
We await your command, milady. What must we do? Shall we contact Her Munificence the Empress? No. No. No.
She slammed the door in their faces and revolved around her dormitory living room with the only light being the lamp on her desk and the pools of ink that reflected its gleam. Her mind raced. It whirred. It folded inward and outward as she clutched her temples. Okay. Okay, Joliet. You may quite possibly be the most unlucky person in the entire world. This situation might possibly be the worst situation anyone could ever be in. But nothing. She couldn't think of a single solitary positive, and even the fact that she only had 3 known enemies made things worse. Because she knew, just because there were 3 of them, they were probably the 3 strongest magical girls ever, and they would only humiliate her all the more when they bent her over and pounded her despite her having 7 times their numbers. All seeming advantages were only future disadvantages to compound the lousiness of her predestined loss. She could not even profess to enter this situation as a true underdog, could not even roll on her back and elicit the pity that she sure had failed, but her failure had always been assured. Nobody would ever believe her that she had 0 chance, 0 fucking chance at all to win this fight or any fight or. She broke down and sobbed on her knees. Of course, the moment she slammed the door on her subordinates, they had simply opened the door again, so they stood and watched her cry. They didn't even say anything. They just waited for her command. Eventually she ran out of tears. That's what usually happened. Nobody ever told her to stop. She sniffled, wiped her eyes, and stood. She said, "Ah," and put on a face as though she were refreshed, although in reality her pancreas simply failed to produce more despair necessary to fuel her sobs.
Your orders, milady,
one of her subordinates finally said. Her orders. Her orders, when she finally came up with them, were quite sensible. She hoped. She did not actually have any tactical know-how, because all the books her mother assigned her to read were treatises on womanhood or religious devotion or piety or Machiavelli. But, generally, she assumed it was best to have all your forces concentrated in one area rather than scattered everywhere. So she had Orland call all members of her platoon to meet at the administration building, near the yacht, as soon as possible, withholding information that Bolingbroke had died. This was also sensible. For starters, the administration building was close to Joliet's dormitory. Secondly, it faced the lake, so they could narrow the directions their enemy might attack from. Thirdly, Dr. Cho and Junior Administrator Hedgewish, the only other people who could feasibly take command instead of Joliet, would be there. It also made sense not to tell her platoon about Bolingbroke's death, because if they knew that, they probably would never listen to anything Joliet told them to do. Something weird had already happened at the administration building, though. Someone had driven a car into the wall. Blood covered the walkway and led into the medical building. Joliet drew back and almost gave an order for her soldiers to retreat, but Hedgewish stepped out and hailed her. 4th Centurion Joliet was not wearing a regulation white suit. She had ink all over her clothes and skin. Her hair was mussed, she had a cut on her cheek, and her eyes were still a little puffy. Somehow, Hedgewish looked only a little less bad. The two of them and Dr. Cho congregated in the administration building's assembly room. Harvey, Orland, and Paulus waited outside as they finished calling the rest of the platoon, and apparently Midlothian and Flossmoor were already in the medical building. Hedgewish and Dr. Cho knew the basics of the situation. Joliet only had to explain that Bolingbroke was most likely dead. Upon that explanation, they sat in silence. The assembly room seated 12 people around a long table. 2 black screens hung from the wall. The room was otherwise empty. Joliet paced one side of the table, Hedgewish sat stooped with her chin cradled on a thatch work of her own fingers, and Dr. Cho leaned against the wall under the monitors.
"Whether you wanted me to or not, milady," said Hedgewish, "I've already contacted the other centurions."
Yeah. It was the obvious thing to do, the safest thing to do, but it killed Joliet inside. Because Cicero or Cook, if they had been in Joliet's position, wouldn't call for reinforcements. They wouldn't need help. Against 3 magical girls? Either of them would have taken the fight by themselves. The idea that a platoon of 20 could lose with such a numeric advantage.
"Only Joliet," they would say. "All 3 of the other centurions and their platoons have reached their first destinations. Centurion Cicero's platoon, in Indianapolis, is closest to us." "How far is that exactly?" "About 3 hours. Milady,"
said Hedgewish.
"However, Centurion Cicero's platoon has already engaged with the magical girls of Indianapolis and she claims she can't afford to fall back now. Centurions Cook and Aurora expressed similar sentiments."
Joliet had expected something like that.
"So they won't help us." "Centurion Cicero claims she can reinforce us tomorrow, after Indianapolis is secured." "When specifically?" She refrained from particulars.
On a swivel of her heel mid-pace, Joliet stumbled and segued the motion into seizing herself by the hair. She doubled over and moaned as her pancreas reactivated and the humors flowed in excess.
"It's her plan. It's her plan, how else? How else are we invaded mere hours after everyone leaves? She's testing me, no, worse, she knows I'll never pass this test. She's going to get rid of me like DuPage. She realizes I'm a mistake. She..." "Centurion Joliet. Please."
Joliet clawed at her cheeks.
"This isn't an invasion, it's an abortion." "Centurion Joliet. Your mother the Empress loves you. You are blessed with her everlasting favor."
Hedgewish's dull tone expressed the true meaning of her words.
"It's clear our enemies were waiting for the other platoons to leave before they attacked. It was not pre-planned by the Empress."
Nonetheless, Joliet roved in an epileptic fit along the side of the table. Too many failures. Too many chances. Her mother's silent goodwill finally bankrupted, after no word from her, neither admonishment or encouragement, her entire life, after nothing but a ceaseless line of promotions and expectations but without any gravity placed on whether she fulfilled her roles and duties well or ill. Gut. She leaned back her head and allowed her vision to blur under the lights above. She was going to die. Her palms pressed together and she shook her hands back and forth before her.
"Ah! Excuse me,
said Dr. Cho.
My apologies, I've been thinking about something more significant during all this. But what exactly is the issue? The Empress and the handmaiden are here. Those two'll never lose.
The apathy of her companions only isolated Joliet in a personal hell.
Neither of them are here obviously. That's incorrect, said Hedwig. The handmaiden changed the costumes of Palos and Flossmoor this morning. She's around somewhere. Wrong, wrong.
Joliet pressed her fingertips to the bridge of her nose and cradled her chin on her thumbs.
My mother has an extremely important job in a city far away from here. And she needs the handmaiden's help to do it. Honestly, both of them are almost never in this city. Even if they like it to look otherwise.
Hedwig looked to Dr. Cho with obvious suspicion on her face, but Dr. Cho had closed her eyes.
Well,
Hedwig said,
I'm not sure whether you should have disclosed information like that to people without proper clearance. Given the extreme circumstances, milady, I'll assume you exercised proper judgment. Nonetheless, I can still contact my boss, the senior administrator. She doesn't exist, said Joliet. With all due respect, milady, that's incorrect. I've spoken with the senior administrator many times in person. The senior administrator is just the handmaiden. She changes her appearance to promote the illusion that my mother trusts more people than she actually does. But, no, I've seen the handmaiden and the senior administrator together. At DuPage's funeral even. Standing next to each other,
Joliet allowed herself to grin.
The handmaiden's pretty good at changing the way things look, hey.
She wasn't sure exactly what prompted her to make these admissions. Obviously Hedwig and even Dr. Cho weren't supposed to know these things. With Joliet's rank all she had to say was,
the Empress isn't here. The handmaiden isn't here. The senior administrator isn't here. I know these things, and that's final.
But she didn't say that. Something about revealing the information made her feel good. It made her feel a little more in control of the situation. Plus, she could always use her power to fix things if needed. When Joliet could breathe and consider the situation, even if it was a bad situation, in a logical way, then she felt a little better. When she lost her head and made a bunch of melodramatic sweeping statements, either aloud or mentally, that was no good for her. Of course, when her head was clear, she felt better was a pointless platitude. But the fact that she had entered a frame of mind where she could say something redundant must mean she had at least calmed somewhat. Hedwig stared the entire time in silence. She had an easy-to-read face that at first looked doubtful and then, after she had time to consider, sagged with resignation that Joliet was absolutely right. Joliet was right. Even in a calamity like this, Joliet could find some solace. Solace ruined by what came next, as Dr. Cho slapped her hands on the table and left 2 massive bloody prints.
This has been enlightening, but I must return to my work.
She headed for the door and all Joliet did was make a HRRK noise. She flinched forward and tried to say anything to stop her, but she said nothing. Hedwig said it instead.
Doctor, you have to stay. We haven't decided on a plan of action. And? I'm no tactician.
Dr. Cho, in opening the assembly room door, left another bloody print on the knob, so it looked like the scene of a murder.
I'm not even good at fighting, and neither are my creations, at least none of the ones present. I considered it important to learn the situation so I would know whether to be concerned, and knowing it, I'm not. So I'll leave you two to do what you do best. Besides, this is all rather humdrum compared to what happened earlier tonight. An encounter with a deity. Surely she must have left some mark of her presence. Microscopic residue? Infrared.
Deity? Joliet was sick of deities. She had read far too many tomes about them on her mother's behest. Meanwhile, Hedwig stood so fast her chair fell over.
Not concerned. Those are 3 powerful magical girls out there. They're strong and we're off guard. They can easily overrun us if we're not careful. Overrun you, loves. Fortunately, I don't rely solely on the Empire for my protection. Ta-ta.
At which, the doctor left the room and her sneakers slapped down the linoleum hallway until she door swung shut.
I'll go after her,
said Hedwig, halfway to the door.
Wasting your time.
Joliet sunk into one of the chairs she had pulled out on numerous occasions prior when she attempted to sit and then didn't.
It's not even worth it. She knows less about this military junk than I do. Face it, it's over. We're screwed.
Saying it's over and we're screwed made Joliet feel better too. She'd feel best if Hedwig also said those words. It was simple facts, after all. Sure, they had 20 magical girls at their disposal. But they also had Joliet, who counted for -21 magical girls. Simple math dictated they would fall flat on their face. Hedwig slammed her fists on the door and Joliet nearly fell out of her chair.
Will you just shut up? HKK. You heard me. Yeah. You fucking heard me. Junior Administrator, that language. What? Will you tell mommy on me? You have made me so fucking sick listening to you whine this whole time and act like we've already lost when we have every fucking advantage. It's pathetic. I understand now why everyone talks shit behind your back. Jesus. Fuck. You're somehow more stressful than anything I've already dealt with today, and I've dealt with a fucking lot.
The more Joliet shrank, the more Hedwig grew. The junior administrator? She could say words like these. The benign, quiet girl who sorted files and rarely uttered anything more than a yes milady? Joliet blinked and started to sweat.
Because if you won't fucking take command here, then I will. I'm sick and tired of my life and the lives of everyone else around me being subjected to leaders, authorities, gods completely out of my control and completely out of their fucking minds, be they lunatics or idiots or whatever the fuck you are.
Hedwig's skin crawled across her and her eyes swept through Joliet like a laser. A series of guttural stops and phlegmatic rasps echoed in Joliet's mouth and her hands scrambled against her body as she clutched herself. That thin fragment of stabilization afforded her in the murk of despair, that idea that all uncertainty could be removed if she simply threw the whole thing out the window and eliminated herself as an actor, it all cracked. Hedwig swung a rusted hook into her gut and wrenched her fish-eaten body out the sill to seafloor, up 17 layers of oceanic biome, back into the nebulous penumbra where the forms of either whales or great whites swam. Amid the wheezes only a single intelligible word, no.
Yes. Yes. I refuse to die, and if I have to twist the whole fucking chain of command of this society to live, then I'll fucking do it. But what can we do? They're stronger than us.
Some of the fire in Hedwig's face glazed over. She exhaled and closed her eyes.
I'll petition the senior administrator, or the handmaiden, if they're really the same, for all available records on the Seattle twins and the Terminatrix who attacked Palos. Even if she gives you that. It doesn't matter. It does. It does.
Hedwig opened her eyes.
Remember. Our objective isn't to kill them. We only have to survive another day for Cicero's platoon. Cicero won't come. Nor Cook, nor Aurora, nor her. They all hate me. They all want me to die. That's the whole point.
You're wrong, said Hedwig.
They don't hate you. They don't care about you at all. But there is something here they do care about, and it isn't me, and it isn't Dr. Cho, and it isn't any one of our girls.
She swept a hand behind her and pointed at the door.
They care about the records. The data we've compiled on every magical girl in the nation. Because if they want to conquer this nation.
Everything on Joliet's face was wet, and when she wiped her forehead her hand came back black, congealed with ink. Her body tremored from breath. The records. The records.
The Seattle twins want those papers,
said Hedwig.
It was in Lieutenant Kenosha's report. When she was undercover as Collins in Denver, she encountered them. So we know we have something we can leverage, against both our enemies and our allies.
She rubbed her head too, although not to wipe away sweat but to massage her forehead with her fingertips. Junior Administrator Hedwig. Joliet's mother had recruited her a few months ago. Had sought her out particularly and immediately promoted her to an administrative post. Her power was confidential even to someone like Joliet, who knew many of the Empire's secrets. Where did this Hedwig come from?
I can think of something,
Hedwig said.
I can put these pieces together and form a strategy. You can still issue the orders if you want. I don't care if you take all the credit when every one of us comes out alive. But I'm taking control of this situation. Is that understood?
What could Joliet do? Except nod. A long, drawn breath.
Good.
Hedwig let her hands fall. She stood silent in front of the door and the whole room was silent because of it. They were two bodies, Hedwig and Joliet, in a space designed for many more. The space between them was the length of 5 chairs along a table. Then Hedwig walked that gap and stopped at Joliet's side. She placed a hand on Joliet's shoulder.
Don't worry.
All intensity in her demeanor diminished and what remained was something calm, but her authority remained.
I won't let you die. You will survive.
Joliet looked up at her. Junior Administrator Hedwig, where had she come from? How had she? When did she? The vision became blurry. Joliet flung her arms around Hedwig's waist and squeezed her tight as she began to sob. Just like in her dormitory with everyone watching, and all that shame flared back up into her cheeks, but she cried anyway.
Thank you. I never wanted to. No matter what I told myself, I never wanted to.
Hedwig extricated herself from her grasp, walked back to the door, reinstated the 5-chair gap, and turned a knob.
Now,
she said,
a strategy.
End of chapter. Chapter end.